The emergency transmission cut through the void of space like a knife through silence. Across 17 different star systems, the distress signal reached every known civilization, every advanced species, every military power that had ever shown even the slightest hint of compassion or honor in the galactic community. Admiral Zixtar of the Hegemony felt his three hearts sink as the message played for the fourth time in his command center. The voice belonged to Chancellor Mira Velox of the peaceful Altarian Republic, a species known throughout the galaxy for their dedication to art, philosophy, and healing. They had never raised a weapon in anger, never sought conquest, never even defended themselves beyond the most basic planetary shields. This is Chancellor Mira Velox of Altair Prime. The message began, static crackling through the universal translator. Our world is under siege. The devourers have broken through our outer defenses. Our cities burn. Our people flee to the mountains and the deep caves, but there is nowhere left to run. We have perhaps 3 standard days before complete annihilation. We call upon any who can hear this message, any who value life and light in this dark universe, to come to our aid. We offer everything we have, everything we are, for even the smallest chance of survival. Please, someone, anyone, help us. The transmission ended with the sound of explosions in the background and screaming. Admiral Zixtar stared at the holographic display showing the Altarian system. The peaceful blue-green world that had once been a beacon of culture and learning was now surrounded by the distinctive energy signatures of devourer warships, the insectoid race that consumed entire civilizations, leaving nothing but empty worlds and scattered bones in their wake. Sir, his communications officer spoke carefully, we're receiving similar transmissions from the other major powers. They're all saying the same thing. Zixtar didn't need to ask what they were saying. He already knew. The Altarians were doomed. The Devourers had never been defeated, never been turned back, never shown mercy. Every species that had tried to help previous victims had either been destroyed themselves or had learned to turn away and pretend they hadn't heard the screams. The Centauri Federation sends their regrets. The communications officer continued reading from incoming messages. They say their fleets are too far away, and by the time they arrive, it would be too late. The Vegan Empire claims they're dealing with their own border conflicts. The Crystalline Collective says they cannot risk their peaceful nature for a lost cause. One by one, the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy found reasons to ignore the plea. Zixtar felt his scales ripple with shame, but he knew his own response would be no different. The Hegemony had 47 billion citizens across 12 worlds. He couldn't risk them for a people who were already as good as dead. The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of the engines and the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. Everyone present knew they were witnesses to the death of an entire civilization, and their inaction made them complicit in that death. Sir, the communications officer spoke again, this time with confusion in her voice. We're receiving an acknowledgement signal. Zixtar's head snapped up. From whom? That's just it, sir. The signal is coming from the Sol system, from Earth. A murmur ran through the bridge crew. Earth. The small, blue world inhabited by the humans. A species so new to galactic civilization that most powers barely acknowledged their existence. They had only achieved faster than light travel 3 decades ago, and their technology was considered primitive by galactic standards. Are you certain? Zixtar asked. Yes, sir. The signal is definitely originating from Earth. It's a simple acknowledgement transmission, but the encryption suggests it's from their military command. Zixtar felt his scales ripple again, this time with disbelief. The humans were going to respond? The newest, weakest, most technologically backward species in the galactic community was the only one willing to answer the Altarian plea? What could they possibly do? His tactical officer asked, voicing what everyone was thinking. Their entire military consists of maybe 50 ships, none of them larger than a light cruiser. The Devourers have 300 vessels surrounding Altair Prime, including their planet-killer dreadnoughts. Zixtar had met humans before, during the initial first contact protocols. Strange creatures. These humans, bipedal, mammalian, with an odd mixture of logic and emotion that most species found confusing. They were known for their stubbornness, their tendency to form emotional attachments to other species, and their complete inability to properly calculate odds before acting. Monitor all communications from the Sol system, Zixtar ordered. If the humans are truly responding to this plea, I want to know everything about their response. 3 hours later, his communications officer brought him the intelligence he had requested, and Admiral Zixtar felt his 3 hearts stop beating for several seconds. Sir, long-range sensors are detecting massive movement in the Sol system. Every human military vessel is moving toward the hyperspace jump points. But sir, that's not the strangest part. Continue. They're not just mobilizing their military ships. Our sensors are detecting hundreds of additional vessels joining the formation. Cargo ships, mining vessels, passenger liners, even what appears to be converted civilian craft. It looks like they're mobilizing everything that can mount a weapon or carry troops. Zixtar's tactical display lit up with data streaming in from long-range sensors. The humans weren't just sending a token force to make a noble but futile gesture. They were sending everything they had. How many ships total? He asked. Current count is approaching 1,000 vessels of various classes. And sir, they're still coming. The formation is growing larger every hour. 1,000 ships. The humans had somehow assembled a force twice the size of what any major galactic power possessed. True, most of those ships were civilian vessels that would be completely outclassed by proper military warships, but the sheer audacity of the response was staggering. What are their chances against the Devourers? Zixtar asked his tactical officer. The officer studied his displays for several minutes before responding. Statistically speaking, sir, they have no chance whatsoever. The Devourers have superior numbers, superior technology, superior firepower, and superior tactical experience. Even if the humans had military-grade vessels, which most of their force does not, they would be completely outmatched. Then why are they going? The tactical officer looked puzzled. I don't understand the question, sir. Zixtar realized that perhaps he didn't understand it himself. Why would a species commit suicide for strangers? Why would they throw away everything they had built for people they had never met? It went against every principle of survival, every law of natural selection, every rational thought process. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet, the communications officer announced. Put it through. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a human in what appeared to be a military uniform. The creature's face was marked with scars, suggesting combat experience, and its eyes held a determination that Zixtar found both admirable and terrifying. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force, broadcasting to all galactic powers. Monitoring this frequency, the human began. We have received the distress call from Altair Prime. We are responding with everything we have. To our fellow civilizations watching this crisis unfold, we understand your reluctance to act. We understand that the odds of success are minimal. We understand that the logical choice is to preserve our own forces for our own defense. The human's expression hardened. We also understand that sometimes logic isn't enough. Sometimes you have to do what's right. Even when it's impossible, especially when it's impossible. The Altarians asked for help. Someone has to answer. Admiral Chen's image leaned forward slightly. We know most of you consider us primitive, backward, militarily insignificant. You're probably right. But we're also stubborn, and we don't abandon people who need help. If we're about to die, at least we'll die doing something meaningful. The transmission paused, and Admiral Chen's voice took on a different tone. Not pleading, not desperate, but somehow both challenging and inviting. Any of you who want to join us at Altair Prime, you're welcome. Any of you who want to stand with us against impossible odds, we'd be honored to fight beside you. But understand this. We're going whether you come or not. The Devourers are about to learn something about humanity that we probably should have mentioned during first contact. Another pause, and Admiral Chen's scarred face showed what humans called a smile. It was not a pleasant expression. We don't know how to quit. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Zixtar staring at a blank holographic display. Around the bridge, his crew was silent. processing what they had just heard. "Sir," his communications officer spoke quietly, "we're detecting hyperspace jump signatures from the Sol system. The human fleet is departing for Altair Prime." Zixtar closed his eyes and tried to think. The humans were committing suicide, and somehow they were making it sound noble. Worse, they were making it sound appealing. The challenge in Admiral Chen's words had been subtle but unmistakable. She hadn't begged for help. She had simply stated that they were going to do the right thing, and anyone who wanted to join them could. It was masterful psychology. Whether intentional or not, the humans had managed to make every other galactic power look cowardly by comparison, while simultaneously offering them a chance to redeem themselves. "Sir," his tactical officer said carefully, "perhaps we should inform High Command about this development." Zixtar nodded absently, but his thoughts were elsewhere. In his centuries of military service, he had never encountered anything like this. Species that committed suicide for honor were not unknown, but species that committed suicide for strangers were unprecedented. Communications, get me a channel to the Centauri Federation, the Vegan Empire, and the Crystalline Collective. Emergency priority. Yes, sir. Channels open. Within minutes, Zixtar was looking at the holographic representations of three of the most powerful military leaders in the galaxy. Admiral Thorek of the Centaurians, with his crystalline exoskeleton gleaming under his ship's lights. General Zerdin of the Vegans, her tentacles writhing with what he recognized as agitation, and the collective consciousness known as Harmony 7, representing the crystalline minds. "You've all monitored the human transmission," Zixtar began without preamble. "Insanity," General Zerdin declared immediately. "Pure, primitive insanity. The humans are about to destroy themselves for nothing." "Nothing?" Admiral Thorek's crystalline voice chimed like breaking glass. "They're about to destroy themselves for the Altarians, for people they've never met, for a world they have no connection to, for a species that has never done anything for them, which makes it insanity," General Xardine repeated. Harmony 7's voice was like a chorus of wind chimes. "The mathematics are clear. The humans cannot succeed. They cannot even survive. Their action serves no logical purpose." Zixtar studied the faces and forms of his fellow commanders, and yet, they're going anyway, which proves they're too primitive for galactic civilization, General Zerdin said. "Perhaps this will serve as a valuable lesson to other newcomer species about the realities of galactic politics." "Will it?" Zixtar asked quietly. "What lesson exactly?" "That when civilized people cry for help, the advanced species of the galaxy will calculate the odds and turn away? That being part of galactic civilization means abandoning anyone who can't offer you something in return?" The communication channel fell silent. Admiral Thorek spoke first. "The humans cannot win, Zixtar. Even if all of us combined our fleets, we could not defeat the Devourers at Altair Prime. They are too strongly entrenched, too numerous, too powerful." "I know," Zixtar replied. "But that's not the question anymore, is it? The question is whether we're content to let the newest members of our community die alone while we watch and calculate survival probabilities. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few," Harmony 7 intoned. "This is basic logic." "Is it?" Zixtar challenged. "Because the humans seem to have calculated it differently. They seem to think the needs of the helpless outweigh the comfort of the powerful." General Zerdin's tentacles stopped writhing. "What are you suggesting, Admiral?" Zixtar looked at each of them in turn. "I'm suggesting that maybe the humans are about to teach us something about what civilization actually means. I'm suggesting that maybe our advanced technology and superior tactics have made us forget something important, which is that some things are worth dying for, even when you can't win." The silence stretched longer this time. Finally, Admiral Thorek spoke, his crystalline voice softer than before. "The hegemony is mobilizing, isn't it?" Zixtar nodded. "Battlefleet Omega is already moving to jump points. We'll reach Altair Prime 6 hours after the humans arrive." "You're as insane as they are," General Xardine said, but her tone lacked conviction. "Probably," Zixtar agreed. "But I'd rather be insane with honor than sane with shame." The humans asked a question with their actions, and I don't like the answer that staying home gives. Admiral Thoric was quiet for a long moment, then his form began to shimmer. I need to contact my high command. This conversation never happened. Agreed, General Exerdin said quickly. No record of this discussion. Confirmed, Harmony 7 chimed. The channels closed, leaving Zixtar alone on his bridge with his crew. But somehow, he didn't feel alone anymore. He had a strange feeling that the humans had started something that was going to spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Sir, his communications officer said. Battlefleet Omega reports ready for departure. Signal the fleet, Zixtar ordered. Jump for Altair Prime. And transmit a message to the human fleet. Tell them the hegemony is honored to stand with Earth. As his flagship entered hyperspace, Admiral Zixtar found himself thinking about the human admiral's words. Sometimes you had to do what was right, even when it was impossible. Especially when it was impossible. The humans were about to face annihilation, but they weren't going to face it alone. In the depths of space, other fleets began moving toward Altair Prime, ships that had never fought together, species that had never trusted each other, civilizations that had spent centuries maintaining careful political distances, all because a young species had decided that some things mattered more than survival. The Devourers were about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their tactics. It was their absolute refusal to let good people die alone. The Devourer hive mind, designated Omega-7, observed the approaching human fleet with what could only be described as amusement, if such creatures were capable of genuine emotion. Through the compound eyes of 1,000 bioships, it watched the primitive vessels emerge from hyperspace at the edge of the Altair system. 1,000 ships. The number was impressive until one considered their composition. Mining vessels with hastily welded weapon mounts, cargo haulers carrying improvised missile pods, passenger liners converted into troop transports. Only 50 of the approaching vessels qualified as actual military craft. And even those were laughably obsolete by galactic standards. Omega-7 had consumed 43 civilizations across 7 galaxies. It had devoured species with technology that made current galactic powers look primitive. It had crushed armadas 10 times the size of what now approached Altair Prime. These humans were either supremely confident or supremely stupid. The hive mind was betting on stupid. Unknown vessels. This is Admiral Sarah Chen, of the Earth Defense Force, came a transmission from the lead human ship. You are engaged in the systematic destruction of a peaceful civilization. Withdraw immediately, or face the consequences. If Omega-7 had possessed a throat, it would have laughed. Instead, it simply directed its biofleet to ignore the humans and continue the bombardment of Altair Prime. The planet's surface was already cracked and burning. The Altarian population centers had been reduced to smoking ruins. Perhaps another 12 hours of bombardment would finish the job. The humans could watch. But the humans, it seemed, had other ideas. All vessels, this is Admiral Chen, execute Thunder Protocol. Omega-7 barely had time to process the order before space around Altair Prime transformed into chaos. The human fleet didn't advance in formation. They didn't attempt complex tactical maneuvers. They didn't even seem to have a coherent battle plan. Instead, they scattered in every direction like a school of fish, each ship choosing its own target and attack vector. Mining vessels dove straight at Devourer dreadnoughts, their improvised weapons blazing. Cargo haulers used their massive bulk as battering rams, smashing into the flanks of bioships 3 times their size. Passenger liners disgorged clouds of one-man fighters that swarmed around larger vessels like angry insects. It was pandemonium. It was chaos. It was completely contrary to every established principle of space warfare. It was also devastatingly effective. The Devourer fleet had been arranged for planetary bombardment, not ship-to-ship combat. Their formation was optimized for sustained fire against surface targets, not defense against a multi-directional assault by vessels that seemed to have no regard for their own survival. Omega-7 watched in growing alarm as human ships tore through its carefully positioned fleet. A converted mining vessel, its hull scarred and pitted from years of asteroid work, somehow managed to ram its drilling laser straight through the command center of a Devourer heavy cruiser. A cargo hauler, Its massive hold, filled with improvised explosives, deliberately collided with a bioship's weapon clusters in what could only be a suicide attack. But the humans weren't just dying gloriously, they were winning. How? Omega-7 demanded through its network of consciousness. How are these primitives succeeding? The answer came from one of its tactical nodes. They're not fighting like a unified fleet, hive mind. They're fighting like individual hunters, each choosing their own prey. Our defensive algorithms can't predict their movements because they're not following any tactical doctrine we've ever encountered. Indeed, as Omega-7 analyzed the battle, it realized that the humans had somehow turned their greatest weakness into a strength. Their ships were too diverse to coordinate properly, so they hadn't tried to coordinate at all. Instead, each vessel was fighting its own private war, using its unique capabilities in ways that no tactical computer could anticipate. A passenger liner had somehow managed to get within point-blank range of a Devourer dreadnought by pretending to be disabled. When the bioship moved in to finish it off, the liner opened its cargo bays and deployed what appeared to be an entire battalion of soldiers in powered armor, who proceeded to cut their way into the dreadnought's hull with plasma cutters. A mining consortium vessel was using its ore processing equipment to literally eat through the armor of a Devourer destroyer, consuming the enemy ship piece by piece like some mechanical parasite. Most bizarre of all, a human research vessel had somehow managed to hack into the Devourer communication network and was broadcasting what appeared to be human music. The noise was interfering with Omega-7's ability to coordinate its forces, and worse, it was having an actual psychological effect on the hive mind itself. What is this audio transmission? Omega-7 demanded. Analysis indicates it is a form of human cultural expression called heavy metal, one of its tactical nodes reported. The lyrics appear to be about defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. Turn it off. Unable to comply, the human vessel has somehow integrated the transmission into our own command frequencies. Eliminating the source will require destroying our communication network. Omega-7's attention was drawn to a new development. The human flagship, a vessel that barely qualified as a heavy cruiser, was driving straight toward the center of the Devourer formation. Its weapons were blazing, its shields were failing, and its hull was venting atmosphere. But it showed no signs of changing course. Devourer fleet, this is Admiral Chen, came a transmission from the dying ship. You wanted to know what humans are capable of? Let me show you. The flagship's engine signature suddenly spiked beyond any safe operating parameters. Omega-7 realized with horror that the humans were preparing to detonate their own faster-than-light drive while still inside the gravity well of the system. Impossible, Omega-7 transmitted. The energy release will destroy everything within. The human flagship exploded in a burst of twisted space-time that tore a hole in the fabric of reality itself. The hyperspace rift consumed 3 Devourer dreadnoughts and sent devastating gravitational waves throughout the fleet formation. But Admiral Chen's sacrifice was only the beginning. All remaining vessels, this is Captain Martinez aboard the UES Defiance, came a new transmission. Admiral Chen has shown us the way. All ships, full power to engines. If we're going down, we're taking them with us. What followed was the most beautiful and terrifying display of self-sacrifice that Omega-7 had ever witnessed. One by one, human vessels began overloading their power cores, ramming enemy ships, detonating their cargo holds, and performing impossible maneuvers that resulted in mutual destruction. But for every human ship that died, it took 2 or 3 Devourer vessels with it. Hivemind, one of its tactical nodes reported, "We are losing ships faster than we are destroying them. At current exchange rates, the human fleet will achieve tactical victory through pure attrition." That's impossible, Omega-7 raged. We have superior technology, superior numbers, superior firepower. Yes, Hivemind, but they have something we do not. Which is? They do not appear to be afraid of death. In fact, they seem to view it as an acceptable trade for inflicting damage upon us. Omega-7 tried to process this information. In its countless conquests across multiple galaxies, it had never encountered a species that fought with such reckless disregard for survival. Every other civilization had eventually reached a point where self-preservation overcame their desire to fight. They would retreat, surrender, or at least attempt to negotiate. The humans were doing none of those things. They were fighting as if death were simply another weapon to be deployed. Hive mind. Another tactical node reported. Long-range sensors are detecting multiple hyperspace signatures, approaching our position. Large fleets. Military-grade vessels. Reinforcements? Omega-7 asked hopefully. Perhaps the other Devourer swarms had finished their current conquests and come to assist. Negative. Hive mind. Signal analysis indicates hegemony, Centauri, vegan, and crystalline fleet signatures. They appear to be responding to the human distress call. Omega-7 felt something that its kind had never experienced before. Genuine fear. The humans had done the impossible. They had inspired the major galactic powers to abandon their careful neutrality and join a hopeless battle. How many ships total? Combined fleet strength appears to be approximately 3,000 vessels, hive mind, all military grade. 3,000 ships. The largest armada ever assembled in galactic history. All coming to answer the call of a species that hadn't even existed on the galactic stage 30 years ago. This is Admiral Zix Tar of the Hegemony Battle Fleet Omega, came a transmission as the first of the reinforcements emerged from hyperspace. To our human allies, we stand with you. To the Devourers, you have made a grave error. You attacked people under our protection. This is Admiral Thorek of the Centauri Federation. Came another voice as crystalline ships materialized in perfect formation. The Centauri stand with Earth. Today, we fight as one. One by one, the most powerful military forces in the galaxy announced their allegiance to the human cause. Species that had spent centuries maintaining political distance. Civilizations that had never trusted each other, all united by the example of a primitive species that had chosen to fight impossible odds rather than abandon innocent people. Omega-7 watched its tactical situation deteriorate from hopeless to catastrophic. The Devourer fleet was already reduced to less than half strength from the human assault. Now it faced an organized armada of military vessels backed by crews that had been inspired by human courage. Hive mind, its lead tactical node reported. Recommend immediate withdrawal from the system. Our losses are becoming unsustainable. Negative, Omega-7 replied. We have invested too much in this conquest. Deploy all reserve forces. Activate the planet killers. Hive mind, the planet killers are not yet in position for. Then move them into position. If we cannot have this world, no one can. The massive Devourer bioships began shifting their formation, bringing their most devastating weapons to bear on Altair Prime itself. If the humans wanted to save the Altarians so badly, let them watch as the planet was cracked open and its molten core exposed to space. But the humans, it seemed, had anticipated this move. All vessels, this is Captain Rodriguez aboard the UES Vengeance, came a transmission from what appeared to be a converted cargo hauler. Admiral Chen's final order was to protect the planet at all costs. Martinez Squadron, you know what to do. 12 human vessels broke formation and dove straight toward the Devourer planet killers. These weren't military ships. They were mining barges, cargo haulers, and industrial vessels. But each one had been packed with explosives. Their crews evacuated to other ships. Omega-7 watched in horror as the unmanned human ships smashed into its planet killers like guided missiles, their improvised warheads detonating inside the bioship's weapon chambers. The resulting explosions tore the massive vessels apart from within, removing the Devourer fleet's ability to destroy Altair Prime. This is insane, Omega-7 broadcast on all frequencies. You are destroying your own ships. You are sacrificing your own people. For what? For strangers who mean nothing to you. The response came from multiple human vessels simultaneously, as if the entire fleet had coordinated their answer. For the same reason you wouldn't understand, monster. Because someone asked for help. The combined galactic fleet struck the Devourer formation like a hammer blow. Ships that had never fought together moved with perfect synchronization, as if the human example had somehow taught them to set aside centuries of political mistrust. Hegemony vessels provided cover fire for Centauri fighters. Vegan dreadnoughts coordinated their attacks with crystalline frigates. And throughout it all, The remaining human ships continued their chaotic, individual assault patterns, each vessel finding new and inventive ways to inflict damage far beyond what their specifications should have allowed. Omega-7 found its fleet dissolving around it. Bioships that had survived the conquest of entire worlds were being torn apart by vessels that shouldn't have been able to penetrate their armor. The coordination between species that had never trusted each other was proving devastatingly effective. Hive mind, its final tactical node reported, fleet strength now at 15%. Recommend immediate withdrawal or face complete annihilation. Omega-7 looked at the tactical display, trying to understand how this had happened. How had a fleet of primitive ships crewed by a species barely out of their home system managed to not only survive an encounter with the Devourers but actually inspire the greatest military alliance in galactic history? What are these creatures? It asked. Its tactical nodes. Analysis inconclusive. Hive mind. They appear to be a standard carbon-based mammalian species, with no exceptional physical or mental capabilities. However, their behavioral patterns are unlike anything in our databases. How so? They appear to value the survival of other species more than their own survival. This should not be evolutionarily possible. Yet they demonstrate it consistently. If Omega-7 studied the approaching Allied fleet. The humans had lost more than half their ships, but the survivors were still fighting with undiminished fury, and now they were supported by the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. All surviving vessels, Omega-7 commanded, execute withdrawal protocol. Full retreat to the outer system. Hive mind, what about the conquest of Altair Prime? Altair Prime is lost. This entire system is lost. Mark it in our databases. Avoid any system under human protection. As the Devourer fleet began its retreat, Omega-7 received one final transmission from the human survivors. This is Acting Admiral Thompson of the UES Constitution. To the Devourer fleet. You're leaving. Good. Don't come back. This system is under the protection of the Galactic Defense Alliance, and we don't take kindly to bullies. Galactic Defense Alliance. The humans had managed to create a military alliance between species that had never even shared the same star maps. In the span of a single battle, they had fundamentally altered the political landscape of the galaxy. As its fleet limped toward the edge of the system, Omega-7 began composing its report to the greater hive mind. It would recommend that humanity be classified as a Class X threat, not because of their military capabilities, but because of their infectious idealism. The humans had proven that courage was contagious, that heroism could inspire even the most cynical civilizations to remember what they were supposed to be fighting for. Behind them, the Allied fleets began the work of rebuilding Altair Prime. Species that had never cooperated before were sharing resources, coordinating relief efforts, and planning joint defenses, all because a young species had decided that some things were worth dying for. The Devourers would return to the void between galaxies and plan new conquests, but they would be more careful now. They had learned that there were forces in the universe more dangerous than superior technology or overwhelming numbers. They had learned about hope, and hope, once kindled, was impossible to extinguish. 6 months after the Battle of Altair Prime, Chancellor Mira Velox stood in the rebuilt capital city of her homeworld, watching ships from dozens of different civilizations, working together to repair the damage caused by the Devourer assault. The sight still amazed her every day. Where once there had been smoking ruins, now there were construction sites bustling with activity. Hegemony engineers worked alongside Centauri architects to design buildings that could withstand future attacks. Vegan agricultural specialists shared soil restoration techniques with crystalline environmental experts, and overseeing much of the work were humans. The small bipedal creatures who had saved not just Altair Prime, but possibly the entire galaxy. Chancellor Velox, came a familiar voice behind her. She turned to see Admiral Sarah Chen approaching, her left arm still in a regeneration sleeve from injuries sustained during the battle. The human admiral had survived the destruction of her flagship by being evacuated to another vessel just before the hyperspace explosion, though she had insisted on remaining in the system until every last Devourer ship was driven off. Admiral Chen, Mira replied, inclining her head in the formal greeting that had become standard protocol when addressing humans. The gesture was new to galactic diplomacy. created specifically to honor the species that had changed everything. How are the defense preparations progressing? Sarah Chen smiled. An expression that Mira had learned to interpret as both fierce and gentle. Better than expected. The Galactic Defense Alliance now has 57 member civilizations. And growing. We've established patrol routes throughout this sector and set up early warning networks. If the Devourers or any other hostile force tries to attack a peaceful world, they'll face unified opposition. The Galactic Defense Alliance. What had started as a desperate attempt to save one world had evolved into the largest military and political organization in galactic history. Species that had maintained suspicious isolation for centuries were now sharing technology, coordinating defenses, and working together on humanitarian projects across the galaxy. I still find it difficult to believe, Mira admitted. The transformation has been so rapid, so complete. Before your intervention, most galactic powers wouldn't even acknowledge distress calls from other species. Admiral Chen's expression grew thoughtful. We've been thinking about that. My staff psychologists have a theory about what happened. I would be interested to hear it. They think the galaxy was already ready for change. All these civilizations, they'd been isolated for so long. Maintaining their careful political distances, calculating every interaction in terms of cost and benefit. But deep down, they were tired of being alone. They wanted to be part of something bigger, something meaningful. Chen gestured toward the construction sites where different species worked side by side. We just gave them an excuse to do what they already wanted to do. We showed them that someone was willing to take the first step. Mira considered this. In the months since the battle, she had spoken with leaders from across the galaxy. Many of them had confessed privately that they had been looking for an opportunity to break free from the rigid protocols that had governed interspecies relations for centuries. The human example had provided both the inspiration and the justification they needed. But why you? Mira asked. Why were humans the ones willing to take that first step? You're newcomers to galactic civilization. You had the least to gain and the most to lose. Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment, watching a group of human engineers teaching Altarian children how to operate construction equipment. Maybe that's exactly why, she said finally. We didn't know enough to be afraid. We didn't have centuries of careful political calculations holding us back. When we heard your distress call, we just heard people in trouble who needed help. It was more than that, Mira insisted. Other young civilizations have joined the galactic community. None of them responded the way humans did. Chen's smile became more complex. There's something about human nature that most other species find hard to understand. We form bonds quickly, especially with people we see as vulnerable or in need of protection. When we heard your message, we didn't hear strangers asking for help. We heard family in danger. Family. The concept was difficult for many galactic species to grasp. Humans seem to extend familial loyalty far beyond biological relationships, treating entire species as adopted relatives worthy of protection and sacrifice. That tendency must be evolutionary disadvantageous, Mira observed. Sacrificing resources for non-relatives should have been selected against. You'd think so, Chen agreed. But our anthropologists have a different theory. They think it's exactly that tendency that allowed us to build large-scale civilizations in the first place. We learned to see strangers as potential family members instead of potential threats. It made us better at cooperation, better at building alliances, better at creating societies that could survive long-term challenges. A new voice interrupted their conversation. Admiral Chen, Chancellor Velox. They turned to see Admiral Zeke's Tar of the hegemony approaching, his scaled hide bearing the distinctive markings that indicated high honors. I hope I'm not intruding. Not at all, Chen replied. We were discussing the philosophical implications of recent events. Zixtar's scales rippled in what Mira recognized as amusement. Recent events have certainly given philosophers plenty to discuss. I've just received word from the Galactic Council. They've approved the formal establishment of the Defense Alliance Charter. The Galactic Council, once a loose organization focused primarily on trade disputes and territorial negotiations, had been transformed by the events at Altair Prime. Where once there had been careful neutrality and calculated indifference, there was now active cooperation and mutual defense obligations. All 57 members have ratified? Chen asked. 59 as of this morning, Tar corrected. The Andromedan Collective and the Spiral Arm Federation just joined. Both cited human influence as a major factor in their decision. Mira felt a surge of emotion that her species didn't have a proper word for. Pride, mixed with gratitude. Amazement combined with determination. The galaxy will be safer for everyone. Indeed, Tar agreed. But there's more. The Council has also approved something unprecedented. The establishment of humanitarian intervention protocols. If any member civilization receives a distress call from a species under attack, they're now obligated to respond. Admiral Chen's eyebrows rose. Obligated? The human doctrine. They're calling it, Tar explained. Based on the principle you established at this battle. No civilization will be allowed to suffer alone, while others stand by and calculate odds. The human doctrine. Mira found herself both moved and amused by the name. The humans had managed to encode their compassionate recklessness into galactic law. There's been some resistance, Tar continued. Some of the older civilizations argue that it will lead to unnecessary conflicts. That species will become too dependent on outside help instead of developing their own defenses. And what do you think? Chen asked. Tar's scales shifted to a pattern Mira recognized as deep contemplation. I think the galaxy has been stagnant for too long. We've been so focused on maintaining stability that we forgot what we were supposed to be stabilizing. Peace without purpose, security without meaning. The humans reminded us that civilization is supposed to be about more than just survival. A communication device chimed on Admiral Chen's belt. She checked it briefly, then looked up with an expression that mixed excitement with concern. Speaking of humanitarian intervention, she said, "We've just received a distress call from the Kepler system. A species called the Valorians is under attack by something called the Iron Swarm." Mira felt her heart rate increase. The first test of the new protocols. The first chance to see if the lessons learned at Altair Prime would hold. How many Alliance members are responding? Tar asked. Chen smiled, and this time the expression was purely fierce. All of them. Every single member civilization is mobilizing fleets for Kepler. The Iron Swarm is about to discover what happens when you attack someone under Alliance protection. Admiral Tar's scales rippled with what could only be described as savage satisfaction. The humans have created something magnificent, haven't they? A galaxy where bullies can't count on their victims being alone. Mira watched as ships from dozens of different civilizations began departing Altair Prime's orbital facilities, their crews racing to answer another species' call for help. The sight filled her with a profound sense of hope. "Admiral Chen," she said, "I have a question that's been troubling me." "What's that?" "What happens when humanity encounters a situation where this approach doesn't work? What happens when you face a threat that can't be defeated through courage and sacrifice? What happens when being willing to die isn't enough?" Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment, watching the departing ships. "Then we'll figure something else out," she said finally. "That's what humans do. We adapt, we improvise, we find new ways to solve impossible problems. But we never stop trying, and we never abandon people who need our help, even if it means your own destruction." Chen's smile became gentle again. "Especially then. Because if we're the kind of people who abandon others to save ourselves, then what are we really saving?" 3 hours later, Mira stood in the Alliance Command Center watching real-time feeds from the Kepler system. The Iron Swarm had expected to face a single, isolated species with minimal defenses. Instead, they found themselves confronting the largest coordinated fleet in galactic history, led by humans who seemed to view impossible odds as a personal challenge. The battle was brief and decisive. The Iron Swarm, faced with opponents who fought with the unity and determination that had become known throughout the galaxy as the human spirit, withdrew after losing half their forces without inflicting significant casualties on the Alliance fleet. "Another victory for the Defense Alliance," Admiral Tar observed, watching the tactical displays. I wonder if we'll reach a point where hostile forces simply avoid attacking anyone they know is under Alliance protection. That would be the best possible outcome, Mira replied. Peace. Through the reputation. For overwhelming retaliation on behalf of the innocent, Admiral Chen joined them at the command center, having just finished coordinating the relief efforts for the Valorian homeworld. The Valorians want to join the Alliance, she announced. They say they want to be part of an organization that actually keeps its promises. 60 members. The Alliance was growing faster than anyone had anticipated, driven by a simple principle that had somehow eluded galactic civilization for centuries. When someone asks for help, you help them. Admiral, Mira said, there's something I've been meaning to ask you. What's that? Do you ever regret it? The decision to answer our distress call? It cost you so much. Hundreds of ships, thousands of lives, nearly your entire fleet. Admiral Chen's expression grew serious. Every life lost weighs on me, she said. Every ship destroyed, every family that lost someone in that battle. But regret the decision to help? Never. She gestured toward the display showing the Valorian system, where Alliance ships were already beginning reconstruction efforts. Look what came from it. Look what we built together. A galaxy where no one has to face destruction alone, where the strong protect the weak instead of preying on them. That's worth any price. Mira felt tears forming in her eyes, a physiological response that her species shared with humanity. You saved more than just our world that day. You saved what civilization is supposed to mean. 6 months ago, the galaxy had been a cold place, where advanced civilizations calculated the costs of compassion and usually decided it was too expensive. Now it was something warmer, something better, a place where distress calls were answered not because it was profitable, but because it was right, and at the center of it all were the humans, the stubborn, idealistic species, who had refused to accept that being civilized meant abandoning those in need. The transformation wasn't complete. There were still species that held back, still civilizations that preferred isolation to cooperation. But every successful Alliance intervention brought new members, new converts to the idea that the galaxy could be better than the sum of its fears. Admiral, Mira said, what's humanity's next impossible project? Admiral Chen's smile lit up the command center. We're working on something we call the First Contact Protocol. Instead of waiting for species to achieve faster than light travel before we make contact, we're planning to reach out to developing civilizations that show signs of compassionate behavior, help them skip some of the darker phases of technological development, guide them toward joining the galactic community as partners rather than threats, proactive intervention rather than reactive, Zeke Star observed. Ambitious. Some would say reckless, Chen admitted. But we figure, if we can inspire species to be better before they develop the capability to hurt others, the galaxy becomes safer for everyone. Mira shook her head in amazement. The humans weren't content to simply respond to crises. They wanted to prevent them from happening in the first place. The Council will never approve such a radical departure from established protocols, she warned. Admiral Chen's smile became mischievous. Then, I guess we'll just have to prove it works first, and ask for forgiveness later. It's worked pretty well for us so far. As Mira watched the human admiral return to her duties, coordinating relief efforts for the Valorians while simultaneously planning the next phase of galactic transformation, she realized that the Battle of Altair Prime had been just the beginning. The humans weren't content to save one world, or establish one alliance, or solve one crisis. They wanted to save everyone, and somehow, impossibly, they were making it work. The galaxy would never be the same. And for the first time in her life, Mira Velox looked forward to seeing what tomorrow would bring.